More military and public doctors will be deployed to fill service gaps in hospital emergency rooms as the Chuseok holiday nears. This as the health authorities began holding daily briefings from today amid their extended dispute with doctors. The 22nd National Assembly today held its long overdue opening ceremony amid the unusual absence of the president. The bodies of 6 hostages taken by Hamas have been recovered in an underground tunnel in Gaza, sparking a massive protest in Israel. It's September 2nd, 6 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start our coverage with new emergency care measures unveiled today ahead of the Chuseok holiday. The government plans to deploy more military doctors as public concerns grow due to the prolonged walkout by trainee doctors. Choi Min-jung explains.
Around 6 months since the mass resignation of resident doctors, public concern is mounting over the country's emergency care system. With the lack of personnel in emergency units, the government has decided to deploy military doctors to fill the gaps.
We'll deploy replacement personnel, including military doctors and public health doctors, as soon as possible.
On Wednesday, a total of 15 military doctors will be deployed to medical institutions with limited emergency care. Starting next Monday, approximately 235 military and public health doctors will be dispatched to high-risk institutions. The government also laid out measures to prevent a potential medical crisis during the upcoming Chuseok holiday in the 3rd week of September. This comes as the medical community warns that more university hospitals will close emergency rooms during the holiday, while the number of patients is bound to increase.
We'll operate emergency response weeks for approximately 2 weeks, from September 11th to 25th, and make every effort to minimize disruption in treating severe emergency patients.
The lack of personnel has caused university hospitals to suspend the running of emergency rooms during the night and on holidays, causing concern that people will not receive proper emergency treatment. According to the Health Ministry, however, 99% of the emergency rooms are still operating 24 hours a day, while around 6% are operating with a reduced number of beds. The total number of doctors working in emergency rooms is a little over 74% of the average. Monday's briefing was the government's first daily briefing held to provide the public with up-to-date details on emergency care. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The top office has disclosed details of a comprehensive action plan aimed at maintaining cybersecurity in the wake of evolving threats from North Korea. Our correspondent Woo Soo-young explains.
South Korea will take a preemptive and offensive response to fast-evolving cyber threats, from hacking and cryptocurrency theft to deepfakes and disinformation spread by malicious actors, namely North Korea. National Security Advisor Shin Won-sik unveiled on Sunday the Yoon Suk-yeol administration's National Cybersecurity Basic Plan, a whole-of-government effort to tackle virtual threats to South Korea's national security, financial institutions, public infrastructure and social stability.
The government will strengthen the Republic of Korea's cybersecurity capabilities, providing a safe cyberspace for citizens and businesses, and strive to become a global pivotal state that fulfills its roles and responsibilities in the international community.
Given the increasingly sophisticated and widespread nature of cybersecurity threats, a total of 14 government ministries and agencies will work on 100 cybersecurity tasks, with the National Security Council acting as the control tower. For instance, the Unification Ministry and the National Police Agency will jointly counter and eradicate North Korea's influence operations, which are aimed at stirring social division through fake news, propaganda and other such tactics. The Defense Ministry will reinforce cyber operation capabilities and work with the Science Ministry to cultivate military cyber specialists. Meanwhile, the Korea Communications Commission will establish standards on tackling disinformation. The Basic Plan prevents follow-up measures to the government's National Cybersecurity Strategy released in February, which comprises of 5 main points. First, Seoul will step up cyber defense activities and establish the basis for responding to influence operations. Second, it will aim to strengthen cooperation with other liberal democracies to create a safe and secure cyberspace worldwide. The government will also strengthen cyber resilience by safeguarding critical national infrastructure, as well as information and communication platforms widely used by members of the public. It also seeks to boost investment in research and development to grow a competitive edge in critical and emerging technologies, and forge cooperation between individuals, firms and government to bolster operation capabilities across a range of sectors. According to the National Intelligence Service, South Korea's public institutions last year were hit with around 1.62 million cyber attacks per day, with 80% of those cases originating from North Korea. The cash poor regime has also stolen over $3 billion of cryptocurrency since 2017, with half of that invested in nuclear and missile development, according to experts. Going forward, Seoul hopes to enact a basic cybersecurity law which would enable domestic intelligence and investigative agencies to respond to international and state-backed hacking groups. Arirang News.
Police have begun a preliminary investigation into Telegram as deep-fake online sexual crimes have become a serious social problem. Choi Soo-hyung reports.
South Korean police have started an investigation into Telegram, the social network messaging application company, accusing it of aiding deepfake sex crimes. This is the first time the authorities have begun investigating Telegram itself. During a briefing on Monday, the National Police Agency said it was difficult to get information such as suspects' accounts and other material from Telegram. However, it stated that it is doing its best and has managed to catch some suspects who use Telegram. Additionally, the NPA said it is closely cooperating with the French authorities who started an investigation earlier to find ways to establish the joint operation. On August 24th, French police arrested Telegram's founder Pavel Durov in Paris on charges of facilitating and conspiring in online sex crimes and drug distribution. Back in March, when the French government was investigating child sexual abuse content, it had asked Telegram to identify the suspects, but received no response, leading it to issue an arrest warrant for Durov. As international concerns over such crimes on Telegram grow, the South Korean government also started a thorough investigation. Police reported that they have received 88 reports and identified 24 suspects from August 26th to 29th. They are also investigating 8 Telegram programs that automatically create illegal deepfake sex videos and plan to look into group chat rooms where the videos are being spread. The government has warned that it will continue to take strong action against deepfake sex crimes committed on Telegram. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
In other news, the opening of the 22nd National Assembly was officially celebrated on Monday, which has been long overdue. Lawmakers vowed to fulfill their duties for the people. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Si-hoo walks us through what's to come next.
On Monday, the 22nd National Assembly officially celebrated its opening, over 3 months into its term, and 300 lawmakers were finally sworn in.
국회의원의 직무를 양심에 따라 성실히 수행할 것을 국민 앞에 엄숙히 선서합니다.
Speaker Woo Won-sik delivered celebratory remarks and said he hoped the event would serve as an opportunity for representatives to reflect on the past 3 months and also recollect their determination in working for the people.
National Assembly will do all it can to achieve its mission to protect the people and move forward into the future.
Woo vowed that rival lawmakers would work together to tackle immediate pending issues, such as surging deepfake sexual exploitation cases and the worsening of extreme weather conditions. In the long term, the Assembly will work to alleviate population issues amid the low birth rate and aging society. The ceremony was initially scheduled for early July, but was postponed amid bickering between the rival parties over pending issues. Monday's event marks the longest wait for an opening ceremony since a constitutional amendment in 1987 that consolidated democracy in the country. Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol did not attend the ceremony, as according to an official at the presidential office, he awaits the normalization of parliament where opposition lawmakers have been unilaterally pushing for certain bills, calling for a special prosecutor and the impeachment of nominated officials. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, along with other key members of the cabinet, attended the ceremony. Also invited were people from all walks of life, including small business owners, scientists, firefighters, medical workers, and the descendants of ethnic Koreans who resided in former Soviet Union states in Central Asia. Monday also marked the beginning of the Assembly's first 100-day regular session. Coming up first in this are speeches by rival bloc leaders, questioning of government officials, and further potential bipartisan negotiations on livelihood bills as the lawmakers prepare for an inspection of government ministries and departments next month. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the heads of the ruling and opposition parties met over the weekend for their first formal interaction and agreed on broad measures to support people's livelihoods. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young with the details.
The leaders of the rival parties took the first step to breaking a long-standing deadlock between the two parties. On Sunday, the leader of the ruling People Power Party, Han Dong-un, and his counterpart from the main opposition Democratic Party, Lee Jae-myung, held their first official talks at the National Assembly with each party's top policymaker and spokesperson present. According to the spokespersons of the two parties, the two leaders have decided to set up a joint consultative body to address issues related to people's livelihoods where both parties have a consensus. The joint statement also included measures to address the dispute related to medical reform.
The leaders decided to urge the government to strengthen emergency care during the Chuseok holiday and agreed to discuss measures at the parliamentary level.
Both sides agreed to boost support for semiconductors, AI, and to ease the debt burden on small businesses and households. The two sides will also swiftly push for a legislative process to extend parental leave for working parents, as well as increase penalties and improve prevention measures for deepfake sex crimes. However, the party leaders failed to find common ground on controversial issues such as providing relief vouchers to the entire population and starting a special prosecution probe into the death of a Marine during last year's flood rescue operations.
The DP sees cash handouts as a measure for people's livelihood, but taxpayer money is limited. We prefer to provide tailored welfare based on individual needs rather than giving everyone the same benefits.
Since this is an economic and fiscal policy rather than a welfare policy, there's no need to disadvantage higher taxpayers. If we can't offer extra help, we should at least ensure fair support for everyone.
They also failed to reach an agreement on abolishing financial investment income tax, but agreed to discuss ways to tackle structural issues in the stock market. Although a major breakthrough wasn't achieved, both parties believe that the first meeting was still valuable for confirming each other's views.
In terms of people's livelihood and economy, the meeting was significant as it may help guide future legislation. The leaders emphasized the need for more frequent discussions.
It was the first time in 11 years that leaders of the rival parties held official talks, and attention is now on whether this will lead to sustained cooperation between the two parties. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
In Israel, thousands of demonstrators took to the streets on Sunday demanding a deal for the release of all remaining hostages held by Hamas following news of 6 more hostage killings. Ian Jin has more.
Israel's military recovered the bodies of 6 people in an underground tunnel in the southern Gaza city of Rafah over the weekend, all of them confirmed as being hostages held captive by Hamas. 5 of the 6, including 1 Israeli American, were taken during the music festival on October 7th. Israel's health ministry says autopsies show that they were killed by being shot at close range between 48 and 72 hours before being found. The deaths sparked a massive protest in major cities in Israel. Tens of thousands of Israelis poured onto the streets, demanding that leader Benjamin Netanyahu reach a ceasefire deal to bring the remaining hostages back home. The head of Israel's largest labor union also called for a general strike on Monday, demanding that Netanyahu secure the return of hostages. The union wants to shut down or disrupt major sectors of the Israeli economy, including banking, healthcare, and the country's main airport. Thousands of others also gathered outside of the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem, while the families and relatives of hostages marched with symbolic coffins. Senior Hamas officials said that Israel's refusal to sign a ceasefire agreement to end the 11 months of war was to blame for the deaths. But Prime Minister Netanyahu shifted the blame on Hamas, saying Hamas has refused to agree to any deals since December and rejected a number of U.S.-led deals this year. Netanyahu also vowed that the Israeli government would continue to pursue negotiations to get all the hostages back home, and also vowed revenge for the deaths of the 6 hostages. As of Sunday, 101 hostages are known to remain captive in Gaza, with 97 of those having been abducted on October 7th. Meanwhile, American leaders expressed their frustration and anger Sunday morning over the deaths of the 6 Israeli hostages, including Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Polin, offering condolences and support to Hirsch's families. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, in an official statement, condemned Hamas for what she described as continued brutality. But Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump took to his social media platform Truth Social to slam Harris, saying that the hostage crisis in Israel is only taking place because Harris is weak and ineffective, adding that the October 7th attacks on Israel would have never happened under a Trump administration. Ian, Arirang News.
Intense fighting continues between Ukraine and Russia, with the latter reportedly targeting civilian facilities in the city of Kharkiv and the former industrial sites in the wider Moscow region. Ian, he has the latest.
Rescue teams in Ukraine pulled a man from the rubble after Russian missiles hit a shopping mall and entertainment complex around noon on Sunday. The attack in Ukraine's northeastern city of Kharkiv left at least 47 people injured, including 5 children.
The targets were ordinary civilian structures, a shopping mall, a sports palace, and residential buildings.
This attack follows Russian officials on the same day reporting damage to industrial sites by a Ukrainian drone attack on several areas, including Moscow. Authorities said that Ukraine's drones struck a major power station and an oil refinery, causing fires. Russian officials described this as one of the largest drone attacks by Kyiv since the war began, claiming they intercepted over 150 drones overnight. Kyiv is yet to comment on the drone attacks. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky once again appealed to his allies for permission to use Western-supplied missiles farther inside Russian territory.
And this depends on President Biden, on Prime Minister Starmer, on President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, and others. I thank all those who keep convincing the world to be strong and to finally vanquish Russian terror.
This comes about a week after Russia conducted its most intense airstrike on Ukraine, which targeted energy facilities and other sites. Ian Hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's electricity demand reached a new high in August amid the prolonged extreme summer heat. According to Korea Power Exchange on Monday, peak power demand nationwide rose a little over 6% from the previous year to average a daily record of 87.8 gigawatts last month. It was mostly due to the prolonged heat that persisted throughout the month, leading to higher air conditioner use. The heat wave, or days when temperatures reach a daily high of 33 degrees or more, continued for 16 days in August, the second longest on record, according to the Korea Meteorological Administration. Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us is our sports editor, Paul Need. Hello, Paul.
Hello there.
Let's begin with golf, a win on the LPGA Tour for Yoo Hae-ran.
Yes, her second LPGA Tour win as well. It came via a playoff on Sunday, winning the FM Championship at TPC Boston in Norton, Massachusetts. She beat fellow South Korean Ko Jin-young on the first hole of the sudden death playoff with a par. Both had ended at 15 under par. Liu actually came from a 4-shot deficit at the start of the final round, hitting 9 birdies and 1 bogey. She's only the second South Korean to win on the LPGA Tour this year, Amy Yang being the other.
And now let's move on to the Paralympics in Paris. South Korea's first medals were won in shooting.
Yes, the first gold was won by the pistol shooter Jo Jong-do. He won the 10-meter air pistol event with 237.4 points, 2.5 points ahead of Manish Narwal of India. The first gold followed South Korea's first medal. Ian Lee won silver in the women's 10-meter air rifle standing event on Friday. She finished with 246.8 points, 2.9 points behind Avarna Lekhara of India, who won gold. But another gold in shooting followed for Team Korea. Park Jin-ho won the men's 10-meter air rifle standing SH1 event, earning 249.4 points. In total, Team Korea won 4 medals in shooting over the weekend, as Soon-tae won bronze in the mixed 10-meter air rifle standing SH2.
And in badminton and boccia, some medals for Team Korea. What can you tell us?
Yes, silver in both of those events. Starting with badminton, Jung Jae-gun and Yoo Soo-young won silver in the men's doubles. In Sunday's final, they lost 2-0 to the Chinese team, the gold medalists from the 2020 Tokyo Paralympics. But both could add to their medal counts as they will compete in the bronze medal matches in their singles events. In boccia, Jung Soo-young claimed silver in the BC2 women's individual event. She lost with a final score of 1-4 to Portugal's Cristina Gonçalves. This is Jung's first medal in 12 years, and she aims to win gold in the team event starting on Tuesday.
And finally, to Taekwondo, a medal in South Korea's national sports.
Yes, Ju Jong-hoon won the bronze medal. It came in the 80-kilogram K44 category on Saturday. Ju overcame Nurlan Donbayev of Kazakhstan in the bronze medal match, despite carrying a knee injury. This is Ju's second bronze medal in as many Para Games, having also won bronze in Tokyo in 2021. The Games will run until September the 8th, following a 12-day run in the French capital.
All right. Thanks for that, Paul. See you next week.
Thank you.
With scattered rain across the country today, coolness is circulating in the center parts. Light rain will fall in the center parts until tonight, and in the southern parts of the country, it will continue to rain until tomorrow afternoon. There are many places where the heatwave warnings were lifted over the weekend, but a heatwave advisory is still in place in Jeollanam-do province, southern parts of Gangwon-do province, and Jeju Island. After the rain in the center parts of the country stops overnight, the center parts of the country are expected to rise to around 30 degrees again from tomorrow. Tomorrow morning in Seoul, the temperature will be as cool as 22 degrees Celsius. Highs will move up to 31 in Daejeon and Gwangju. It is expected to rain in the Seoul metropolitan area and western part of Gangwon-do province on Thursday and eastern parts of Gangwon-do province on Friday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
Completely new. But something anyone can relate with. Flawlessly made. And tears that go with it. K-drama. Korea is coming at you with another story to tell. Children's. Laughter. Hope. Dream. K-animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends between everyday life and dream. Surprising spectacle where imagination becomes real. An array of subjects catering from infants to adolescents. For our story to reach all corners of the world. K-animation makes healthy laughter for children.
Thanks for joining us. You've tuned into Arirang's Within the Frame. I'm Handan in Seoul. 677.4 trillion won, or roughly $506 billion US. That's the size of next year's budget proposed by the government, while keeping the budget increase within the 3% range for the second straight year. To ensure the country's fiscal health, the government prioritized people's livelihoods, expanding the budget for the health, welfare, and labor sectors. It also restored support for R&D to help local companies secure a competitive edge on the global stage. Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol has outlined national pension reform plans with the aim of establishing a sustainable funding mechanism and promoting intergenerational fairness. 2025 budget and pension reform. That's the topic of our discussion today. And for some expert insights, we have Professor Kim Se-wan at Ewha Women's University joining us via Skype. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me today.
We're also delighted to have with us tonight Professor Song Soo-young at Chungang University. It's been a while since we last spoke. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good evening to you, and thank you for inviting me.
All right, Professor Kim, let's kick things off with you. So the government has proposed a budget of 677.4 trillion won, adhering to tight fiscal discipline for the second straight year. It's up just 3.2% from this year. How do you see this?
First of all, it should be pointed out that next year's budget has been constructed with an austerity stance. The Ministry of Economy and Finance says that total government expenditure plan of 677.4 trillion won for 2025 will be submitted to National Assembly. The government expenditure for next year represents an increase of 3.2% compared to this year's budget. Unlike President Moon's administration, which increased the government budget by 8.6% on average from 2017 to 2022, President Yoon's administration emphasizes fiscal soundness and government budget growth rate reduced to 5.1% last year and 2.8% this year at the lowest rate. One of the key features of next year's budget proposal is minimizing the discretionary spending, excluding mandatory expenditures such as basic pension, child allowances, and civil servant salaries. Particularly the budget for SOC, or social overhead capital, a representative discretionary spending category, has been set at 25.5 trillion won, a 3.6% reduction compared to previous year. This marks the second consecutive year of budget cuts in SOC sector.
And we'll discuss more about minimizing the growth rate of discretionary spending as we move on. But before that, Professor Song, actually that is our very next question. So the government minimized the growth rate of discretionary spending, excluding mandatory expenditures, as Professor Kim just pointed out, such as basic pensions, child allowances, and civil servant salaries. The social overhead capital was cut by 3.6%. What's your take on the government's budgetary approach?
Yeah, I think the budget for the vulnerables and economic vitality and also structural improvements for the economy. I agree with that objects and the pillars, but what is very unique and distinctive was building a safe society and strengthening global leadership in diplomacy. Clearly, this is related with the issue of the APEC, which will be held in Gyeongju in the next year. So I think the budget plays a very big role in these. Some diplomacy leadership is important for the next year's budget. And also, what I'm most concerned is, in order to maintain the 3% rule of fiscal rule, to keep the fiscal rule within the, to maintain the deficit within the 3%,
Then the government decided to cut the social overhead capital, as Professor Kim already mentioned, but that part is particularly focused on the maintenance cost. So this implies that in the next year, if the necessary steps to maintain and to improve the quality of the infrastructure that is going to be deteriorated clearly. So what I'm concerned is that might cause some kind of a disaster in the infrastructure. So that is my primary concern. So I would rather suggest the government to make adjustment. Even they could have established a supplementary budget is possible. So they don't have to worry about the fiscal deficit, and they should not stick to the fiscal rule to keep the budget deficit within 3%.
So I think you voiced quite a strong opposition to the government's budget plan. So you're saying that it should further expand the budget. It shouldn't be overly concerned about sticking to the 3% rule, and it should expand and spend much on critical domains such as social infrastructure. Now, Professor Kim, tightening the belt is essential for maintaining Korea's fiscal health, given the record level of national debt and tax deficits, although Professor Song has a somewhat different idea. But some are also concerned that this approach could negatively impact efforts to boost domestic spending. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with you. It is understandable that Korean government budget for next year is designed under austerity stance because government's debt has been quickly increasing over COVID pandemic from 2020 up to over 50% of the GDP. But in this year, one of the major reasons that Korean economy is not recovering fast is a weakening domestic expenditures from households and private corporations. Last month, both government and KDI, which is government think tank, pointed out that weak domestic expenditure is mostly due to higher interest rate. It means that Korean government's policy direction in stimulating domestic expenditure is on lowering domestic interest rate by Bank of Korea while restricting government's expenditure to restore fiscal health. This is the reason why presidential office was unhappy with Bank of Korea's base interest rate freeze 2 weeks ago.
So you're saying what's more important than the budgetary fiscal policy is lowering the interest rates to boost domestic spending. And in a related question, Professor Kim, the combined government and household debt surpassed 3,000 trillion won. That's around $2.2 trillion for the first time at the end of the second quarter. Could this also hamper efforts to boost domestic spending?
Of course, along with continuing higher interest rate, increasing household debt limit further increase of domestic expenditure. As you pointed out, in the second quarter of this year, household debt surged to a record high of about 1,900 trillion won, increasing by about 14 trillion won in the second quarter alone. This sharp increase in household debt is attributed to the increase in housing transactions, which has led to corresponding increase in related loans like mortgage loans. In fact, as of the end of June, household loans, excluding sales credit, grew by 13.9 trillion won compared to the end of the previous quarter. Notably, mortgage loans within household credit saw a significant increase of 16 trillion Korean won. The steep rise in both national and household debt, coupled with prolonged high interest rate, is tightening government and private sector spending. Due to the growing debt burdens, there are concerns that government's total expenditure and interest rate cuts are becoming more constrained. That reduces the flexibility of fiscal and monetary policies in the middle of increasing domestic and international uncertainties.
And before we move on to our next question, just as a side note for our viewers, some are already voicing strong opposition, saying that the next year's budget is insufficient in boosting Korea's sluggish domestic spending. And in response, the government stressed the importance of private sector-led economy rather than relying on a fiscal-driven what it called artificial stimulus. So we'll see how things pan out from here. And Professor Song, the managed fiscal deficit, which reflects the state of the nation's finances, is projected to reach 78 trillion won, or roughly $58 billion. And you've briefly touched upon this, but the government aims to keep the deficit within 3% of GDP in line with fiscal rules until 2028. Could you help us understand what does the 3% target signify and how feasible is it in your view?
Okay, let me tell you first about the managed fiscal balance is the fiscal deficit when you exclude the social security revenue. And the consolidated fiscal balance is the total revenue out of the total expenditure. Still, this current government has some deficit is prevalent, but managed fiscal balance when the social security revenue is, even though it is not a tax revenue, but it works similar to the role. So currently, still some positive revenue is included, then the fiscal balance looks a little bit improved one, but manage the fiscal balance, those should be removed, and then that is the true face of the deficit. But as you mentioned, the 3%, when the government sticks to the 3% rule and this kind of fiscal rule, that could have a really damage on some recovery of the economy, and it could hamper the consumption increase, which is essential for the economy to recover. Currently, Korean economy has shown relatively very good in export. Net export is very nice because of the good performance of the semiconductor and car sales in the U.S. and some Western world. But that does not help much about the domestic economy and the domestic consumption at all. Therefore, I'd like to urge the government should pay attention and take care of domestic economy rather than multinational enterprise performance, which put a cosmetic on the face of the ill patient. So I believe that the government is required to take care of domestic ill patients who have suffered so much from the sputtering economy right now.
And on top of those factors, Korea is also expected to see a tax revenue deficit of nearly 20 trillion won next year. So it looks like it'll be quite challenging to keep the deficit within the target goal of 3% of GDP. And staying with you, Professor Song, moving on to President Yoon's pension reform plan. One key principle of the reform is to differentiate contribution rates for young and old generations. Now, this is aimed at easing the burden on younger people as they have to contribute for a longer period of time and receive payments at a much later date. What's your take on this?
Actually, I have seen the news about the pension reform, which was suggested by the President Yoon recently. So there is a clear message about the direction of the pension reform is one is that some tiered contribution rate should be adjusted along with the age. And the next one is the automatic stabilizer of the pension. Both have some problems. Of course, there could be some benefit, but that is already advertised and so much and praised so much by the government. So I would like to point out the potential serious damages or the problems in this pension reform. First one is the age difference, particularly, for example, the old generation who are supposed to pay higher in contribution, that could provide the incentive for the old generation to retire earlier before this pension reform is implemented. So that caused a serious fiscal deficit burden for the government, unnecessary burden. And another one is, for example, if the 50-year-old is a boundary to determine the level of contribution rate, which will be revised up from the 9% to 13% or 14%, then the problem is 50 years and 1 day old, and the 49 years old and the 364 days old, those two similar aged person could face quite different contribution rate. So that could cause a really problem. And another one is particularly the pension from automatic stabilizer. This is a stabilizer only for the pension fund itself. So per se, it should be work against the fiscal policy to stimulate the economy when the economy is particularly in recess or in the consumption or some growth rate of the economy is very low. Then the government should provoke the economy to recover and increase the consumption. But however, the automatic stabilizer works against because it takes more money to stabilize the pension fund level. Then they takes more contribution out of the people's pocket, which means disposable income for the people will be reduced when the economy is in bad situation. This is exactly against government role with the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. So this is a potential danger and the serious problem and the weaknesses of the automatic stabilizer pension fund. So this should be discarded. I really suggest that this automatic stabilizer program should be discarded and should not be effective for the pension fund reform.
Again, quite a strong opposition to the government's reform plan. You've pointed out various factors that points to the fact that there are so much more complexities for a proper reform than just differentiating the contribution rates between generations, and also it takes a lot more than just an automatic stabilization mechanism. But going back to the details President Yoon outlined, Professor Kim, he didn't set the exact contribution rates for each generation. Now, given that the contribution rate in the current pension scheme is universally set at 9% of all wage earners and business owners' income here in Korea, how much of an increase do you project for the young and the old generation?
Actually, revising national pension contribution rate is a key issue and at the same time very sensitive issue in pension reform. It looks that government's plan is to adjust the speed of increasing the current contribution rate from 9% to 13% based on age groups. As of now, the most likely option is to gradually raise the rate for people in their 20s over 20 years. And for those in their 30s, over 10 years. This generation-based differentiated adjustment system involves rapidly increasing the contribution rate for those in their 40s and 50s who are closer to receiving their pensions, while slowing down the rate of increase for those in their 20s and 30s. It means that there could be intergenerational conflicts on the burden of raising contribution rates if we don't reach a social consensus. So under these circumstances, the government's role and Congress' role is very important to harmonize different voices on the issue of raising contribution rate.
Now, before we wrap up, Professor Song, you've mentioned that differentiating contribution rates for young and old generations will have certain side effects, and the automatic stabilization mechanism would not be that effective. Then what alternatives do we have to reform the national pension system?
Yeah, the sudden increase of the contribution rate clearly has an adverse effect. Rather, I would like to defer the entitlement age to be eligible for the pension recipient. So which means currently 63 years old is the age who become eligible for the pension reception. So pension payment, then it could be increased gradually to 65 years old. I think that would be the appropriate way to avoid some resistance and some adverse incentive for the older generations to retire early. So that is one way to do that. And then current pension reform, the government plan has postulated some income replacement rate as 40%, which is very low. So that should be increased to 44%, which was conceded by the opposition party from the 45%. But eventually, we don't have to need to stick to some robustness of the pension fund itself. When we maintain a certain level of pension fund forever, it means those monies cannot be used for the welfare improvement for the people at all, because they have to maintain that level always. So eventually, I would like to, the government and the people should admit that the tax should be the source to guarantee the pension payment for the older generations for the retirement age.
All right, and we'll conclude our discussions there. Thank you, as always, Professor Song, for your analysis.
Thank you.
And thank you as well, Professor Kim, for your perspectives.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.